Hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe podcast. I'm your host, James, and this month we are celebrating Halloween. Not just Halloween, but all things scary in Star Wars. We're going to look at what I've been doing and what you've been doing this month as well as letting you know who's going to be popping in for a chat next month. So, looking at Star Wars with a sensibility of the time of year, it's not two things that really go hand in hand naturally. It can do, it has the potential to, and it does at times. We have a variety of different things that could be considered scary in Star Wars, but none of them are outright horror or truly scary. Darth Vader is often referred to as the scariest villain in cinema history. And that's not because he's a big monster with drooling fangs or anything like that, or a sinister killer. He is that second thing. I find him very sinister, and he is known to be a killer, but not in the traditional horror sense. And as we are, at the time of release, just getting over the night of trick-or-treating, dressing up in our favourite costumes, going to our strangers for sweets and candy, I wanted to have a look and see what actually are the scariest moments in Star Wars. And there is actually an article on the Star Wars website, starwars.com, for this very time of year. And it's 13 of the scariest Star Wars scenes. Now, I'm going to go a little bit beyond this list as well, I think, because some of the scarier things in Star Wars are not on screen. They are in the books, in the comics, and I'm going to talk through the list, and then I'll go off on a bit of a tangent at the end and add in a few honourable mentions to this list, because this purely focuses on screen. And some of the scarier moments in Star Wars, for me, are definitely those that are written, or in my case, audio. There's so much great possibilities for horror and sort of jump scares and things like that within Star Wars, that I would really like it at some point if they branched out into this a little bit more. So, looking at the list on starwars.com, I really hope this isn't in order. So I'm just going to start at number 1 and work my way down. And I say I hope this isn't in order because I am starting with number 1, and it's titled Dance with the Dianoga. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what the Dianoga is, it's the trash compactor monster. So we're looking at Star Wars A New Hope. 1977. Horror has moved on a lot in nearly 50 years, and tolerances have got a lot higher for what people would consider scary. I remember watching A New Hope as a child, and I was just like, cool, there's a monster. Didn't faze me in the slightest. But I can imagine back then, in the 70s, that this probably was quite scary. And it was this unseen threat. And it's one thing I really like about a lot of sort of the Hitchcock movies. So, before I go any further, I'm a huge horror fan. Huge horror fan. And Hitchcock, I never found it scary. I've watched things like The Omen, which have terrified my parents, who watched it at a similar age to what I watched it. And it just didn't scare me. And that's not me, oh, look how big and brave James is, or anything like that. Times have just moved on. What is shown, certainly in a lot of horror back then, would make a PG-13 film or TV show now. There's just a natural tolerance that is built up over time. I don't disagree with the Dance with the Dianoga, but it's not one that I would have put on the list. But again, as I say, I completely understand it from the 1977 perspective at the time, the unseen threat. I also think if you've read From a Certain Point of View, A New Hope, there is a story about the Dianoga in there, which completely removes any horror element to this scene. But it's a very interesting and claustrophobic scene. I would say the claustrophobia element of it is much more prevalent than the hidden monster, what lies beneath type thing. I can see why it's on the list, especially as we're limiting this particular list to on-screen only. There's not much to choose from in comparison to the expanded universe or even the canon stuff from 2015 onwards. But we'll move on. Number 2 on this list is titled Don't Look Outside, and it's from The Empire Strikes Back. And this is the moment where the Falcon lands in the asteroid field to escape the Empire. Leia is sat in the cockpit. She thinks she hears something. Han and Luke think they hear something. They've gone outside to check it out. And Leia is left alone. And all of a sudden, this big thing slaps itself against the cockpit window. And it's a good jump scare. It gets me sometimes, even now. I'm not really particularly paying attention to the film 100%. It's a good jump scare, and it's one of the ones that immediately springs to mind when I was thinking of scary or jumpy moments in Star Wars. It's a good little jump scare, and I think that's completely justified to be on this list, and I do thoroughly enjoy it. I think it's a great way to show that even way back in 1980, we're setting up things that can live in the vacuum of space, which obviously fast forwarding many, many years to earlier this year, we have the Purgle, and obviously originally introduced in Rebels a few years ago, we have the Purgle, who can traverse space and have biological hyperdrives. So it's, even back then, it's setting up things for the future, which is brilliant what they've done with it. Number 3 on the list is from The Empire Strikes Back. It's the entry into the dining hall for our heroes on Cloud City, and the reveal that Lando is working with the Empire, and none other than Darth Vader himself is sat at the head of the dining table. This scene is great, is really, really good, because as it's revealed later, Lando's not working with them voluntarily. It's very much we're being forced to work with them, or they're going to just kill us all. And it's a great way to show how the Empire operates and how scared people are of the Empire during this time. Let's not forget, the Empire in universe is at the height of its powers at this point in time. The Empire Strikes Back. They can send off... Yeah, they've lost the Death Star. They are ticked off at this point in time. They are going on the offensive, which is quite often when people or organisations are at their most dangerous, is when they've had a setback and they redouble their efforts and they push on and they really, really go for it. Having Boba Fett there in the scene as well only adds to it, because he's playing the role of kind of bodyguard to Darth Vader at that point in time. But you quickly see when Han shoots and Vader just absorbs the blast of fire that Vader doesn't need a bodyguard. He really doesn't. Never needed one. Won't have one. And it's a good scene. It's a good jump scare of like, it's not scary, it's not horror, but it's kind of a, oh no, what we feared has come true. It's a fear rather than a scare, but it's a really good scene. Number 4 on the list is Journey in the Cave. Again, Empire Strikes Back, and again there are creepy elements to it. Empire is a very dark film in its tone. It's fear, but not ours necessarily. It's creepy. It's surrounded by roots from the trees. It's this big cave, dark cave that Luke has to go into. But it's more Luke's fear than ours. He only takes with him what he has. I've butchered that line from Yoda. But he takes his lightsaber with him. He confronts the apparition of Vader. In an iconic scene, he cleaves Vader's head clear off his body. The mask explodes and exposes Luke's face. So it's fear, it's scary, it's creepy, but it's Luke's fear. And it's something that we can all resonate with to a degree. We all have fears of what we will become and what impact others have had on our lives. So you've got to bear in mind, at this point in time, Luke doesn't know that Vader is Anakin. So he is fearful that if he messes up his training with Yoda, he will become the next Darth Vader. And he doesn't mean that as, I'll become my dad. It very much means it from the sense of, if I fall to the dark side, this is what I become. And it's a tense scene. It's very kind of Hitchcock in terms of deemed a horror, but it's not scary, it's not jumpy, it's tension. It builds and builds and builds in this scene, and it's really, really good. So absolutely warranted on the list. Number 5 is just titled Oh No, the Rancor. This is very much your big monster moment. There is real stakes, because first time watching it through, how can Luke beat this giant beast, this monster that he's got to face without his lightsaber? And so there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of fear for our hero in this scene, and it's a really good scene. I love the fact that they showed the Rancor Keeper distraught at the end of it, but I also don't like it at the same time, because it humanizes the Rancor a little bit, which in the context of this list is fine, but if it was just a mindless beast and monster type thing that wasn't going to couldn't stop until either Luke was dead or it was dead. Obviously we encounter Rancors throughout Star Wars and on film or on the screen. The only other time we've seen them, I believe, is Book of Boba Fett, where Boba ends up riding it. So fearsome creatures, but not terrifying anymore, I don't think. Animated, we did see one in the Bad Batch, which I believe at the time there was some speculation about where this Rancor was going, and if it would actually become the one that Luke fights in this scene in Return of the Jedi. I don't think that turned out to be the case. From memory, it's been a long time since I've sat down and watched Season 2 of The Bad Batch, but it might even have been Season 1, actually. I think it was Season 1. But anyway, whichever one it was, that was another instance of seeing a Rancor on the screen in Star Wars. I don't believe it's my last creature, So have a little mental game with yourself. See if you can figure out what the other creatures are. And we'll find out when we get there. Number 6 on the list, so nearly halfway through, is called The Turn. And I disagree with this one, actually. I don't think this is a scary moment. And it's basically Anakin betraying Mace Windu. I have very strong feelings on Mace Windu. He is not my favourite character, far from it, in Star Wars. I don't think Anakin is justified in what he did, but I don't think I fully blame him for doing what he did to Mace Windu, who has never treated him well. But in that moment, Anakin is so twisted up with his fear of losing Padme that he thinks that Palpatine is the only solution to that problem. And there is a risk, genuine risk, that Mace Windu is going to end Palpatine in this moment. He had bested him. He had him at his mercy. If not for Anakin stepping in when he did, Mace Windu would have won that fight. It would have been a completely different story at that point in time. So that's very much a tragedy element of that scene. But the entire Anakin story is just one big tragedy right up until his redemption in Return of the Jedi. And even his impact beyond that, I think his influence on the sequels is tragic because he's held up as this figure of the Sith by certainly Kylo Ren, and manipulated to be so by Palpatine and Snoke, that there is a lot to be said for the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, the horrors that he unleashed upon the galaxy, which truly start in this moment. So I think there is an element of horror that warrants it being on the list, but it's a dubious one for me. Let me know what you think. You can contact me on Twitter at StarWarsUpod or by email starwarsupod@gmail.com. Number 7 on the list is the end of Anakin from Revenge of the Sith. This is the final battle between... Let me caveat that. This is the final battle of the prequel trilogy between Anakin and Obi-Wan, the culmination of the entire trilogy and the duel on Mustafar. The fight is brilliant and is dangerous and is tense. There's a real horror moment at the end that is just quite graphic to see. Everyone knows the scene by now, but Anakin tries to leap over Obi-Wan, who has the high ground, is dismembered, for want of a better phrase. Obi-Wan just leaves him. He doesn't put him out of his misery. He doesn't end the fight. He picks up his lightsaber and walks off. Passionate words are spoken between the two. Passionate from Anakin is probably a stretch. It was pure hatred at that point in time. Passionate from Obi-Wan for definite, that you were the chosen one. You were supposed to bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. It's a tragedy. Again, it's a tragic moment for Anakin, where even his brother walks away from him at that point in time because of his own actions. There's no getting around that, but his brother does walk away from him. But yeah, there was definitely some horror moments in there. There was some horror dialogue in there as well. Some of the lines written for Anakin to say during that confrontation. Whew, not great. Number 8 on the list, we move into the animated realm and we look at the Clone Wars, which it's called Attack of the Brainworms, and it's in season 2 of the Clone Wars. And this is a parasite that attaches itself to many characters, including another Padawan who is stuck on a ship, as well as the whole platoon of clone troopers, and it turns them into zombie-like creatures. It's controlling them, which is it's the first time Star Wars for me truly ventured into on-screen horror, and they've done it a few other times since as well, which is really good. This was a creepy couple of episodes, and I think they were able to do it because it was animated. It was very alien in its execution, if memory serves me right. Lots of creeping around, and the monsters are loose and things like that. And Ahsoka is on her own, which she's been a couple of times by this point in the series, but not that often, and not often with huge success either. So it was really interesting to see how Ahsoka deals with this. Yeah, I think I'm fairly sure it's a two-parter, and it's a really, really good little arc of the Clone Wars. Really, really recommend it. It's so creepy, as I say. Definitely warranting being on the list. Number 9, Night Sister Spirits Strike. This is from Star Wars Rebels. So, Season 3, I think the episode is called Visions and Voices or something. In fact, it says Visions and Voices in the little blurb beneath the title, so I should really just read ahead a little bit first. But this is really the Night Sisters and the Night Sister Spirits when the Rebel crew go to Dathomir, and this is the part of the story where Sabine finds the Darksaber, and on their escape from Dathomir with the Darksaber, they encounter these spirits who get shot at with blasters, and they get swatted at with the lightsabers. No effect. They're essentially ghosts, and it's creepy. It is creepy, and definitely deserving of being on this list. They do eventually possess Kanan and Sabine, and Ezra is left to dispel the spirits from them and save them. And it's a really, really good episode, which then obviously leads into a variety of mythical things within Star Wars Rebels, World Between Worlds, the Darksaber lore and all the rest of it, and much more Night Sisters as well. So it's a really, really good beginning for the delve into the more mythical side of Star Wars. Number 10, referring back to the other monster on the list. For anyone who guessed Rathtars, give yourself a pat on the back. It's exactly that. Rolling Rathtars from The Force Awakens. They're terrifying monsters. They are terrifying creatures, and they are notoriously difficult to carry as cargo. Of course, Han and Chewie are doing it. Of course they are. There's a little bit of comedy through this with the different gangs and things like that are after Han and Chewie, and the Rathtars are rolling around, and it was adapted into the Lego Star Wars the Force Awakens game as well as the complete saga game. Brilliant fun, but big scary monster, lots of teeth, lots of tentacles. Definitely a little bit of a horror element on it. We have the moment where one of its tentacles gets cut off in a door. Classic horror trope. But it was really good fun. It was a really good fun, little bit scary scene. It's deserving to be on the list, but we kind of knew it was early on enough in the movie that probably could have guessed that Han, Chewie, Rey, Finn and BB-8 were all going to get out okay. It kept us watching. It was a slightly different take on things, and it was a different take, but it was also quite the same. Trash Compactor Monster, Rancor, and now Rathtars, all fairly early on in the movies. So it was just good fun. It was a really good fun, semi-silly scene. Definitely definitely worthy of being on the list. Number 11, I think this is going to be a number of people's scariest moment, specifically on screen. And that is Vader Unleashed. The hallway scene from Rogue One. Definitely the scariest on-screen Vader has ever seen. Certainly in live action. Rebels has a number of scenes with Vader where he is just terrifying. The games have had a couple of scenes. Having just recently finished my Fallen Order playthrough, that final scene where Vader appears is terrifying, but in the best way. And Vader, when he is cut loose like this, there is no one scarier. I know there are people out there who have sort of made the joke of Vader's really extra, and I do kind of agree with this as well. Vader's really extra. He turns off all the lights on his suit just so he can appear in the darkness, and at the end of the scene when he's looking out into space, there shouldn't be any atmosphere, and yet he's sort of making his cape flutter with the Force for effect. There's some funny elements to it which people can fan theory about, but overall, the way he just dismantles the rebels on this is absolutely terrifying, and probably up there as one of the scariest moments on screen for Star Wars. Number 12 is the Ice Spider Swarm from The Mandalorian Season 2. I think this was episode 2 or 3 from Season 2, where Mando and Grogu are transporting the Frog Lady to meet her husband, and they crash on this ice planet, and it's inhabited by these massive ice spiders. I didn't like this episode. I don't like spiders. This affected me on a visceral level. I did not like this episode because of the spiders. I am a huge Harry Potter fan, and all of the scenes with Aragog, nope, no thank you. Didn't even like reading it in the book. Definitely, for me, up there on this list. We have the comedic elements of Grogu keeps eating the Frog Lady's eggs, which and finding out more and more ingenious ways to steal them. But definitely deserves to be up there on the list. And the last one, which is the most recent, in fact, looking at the list, it looks like it's going in release order, but also probably an element, with the possible exception of the Vader corridor scene. The last one is called The Dead Rise from Ahsoka, and it's the reanimated stormtroopers on Peridia. Yeah, it's a cross between the Rebels episode with the Dathomirian spirits and just the relentless onslaught of the Vader hallway scene. You have Ahsoka the White at this point in time. You have Ezra and you have Sabine, all trying to hold off this undead army of stormtroopers who have got Night Sister ribbons wrapped around them. It's terrifying. They're trying to get through to get to Thrawn and to get to the Night Mothers, and they just can't. And it's zombies, it's witchcraft, it's great lightsabers, it's everything you would want from a Star Wars horror. Definitely, for me, it's either this, the spiders from The Mandalorian, or the Vader hallway scene are my top picks for what this is, for the scariest moments in Star Wars from this list. But yeah, there's a number of other scary moments from Star Wars media. I haven't consumed all of the media. I'm working my way through it at the moment. I think The Fall of Starlight is actually up there for me at the moment. It's one of the first ones that sort of came to mind when I started to turn my attention to this topic. And the final third of Fallen Star is horrific in its destruction, in its depiction and in the amount of lives that were lost. The Nile, as a concept, also incredibly scary. They are a great villain that isn't force sensitive. They have the Nameless, who are a great weapon against the Jedi. I definitely think if we're expanding this list to written media as well, I definitely think that the Fall of Starlight is up there. The brother from the Mortis arc in the Clone Wars, turning into different creatures and things like that. He's the embodiment of evil. How can that not be scary? The visions he gives Anakin, just the battle to keep him at bay as well. I think that's a really good sort of scary moment in Star Wars. You have in Legends written material now, Death Troopers, which we were obviously introduced to the concept of Death Troopers in Rogue One. That is 2 separate words. This book is 1 word, Death Troopers, all in one. It's written by Joe Schreiber. It's a horror story inspired by The Shining and Alien. So it came out in 2009. Just having a quick look at the synopsis for it. So there is a Imperial prison barge that has broken down, and its only hope is the Star Destroyer called Vector, which is drifting nearby, derelict and seemingly abandoned. So they send over a boarding party, and essentially zombies ensue. So it's a Han Solo and Chewbacca story. There's also a book before it called Red Harvest as well. So there's a bit of a duology here. But from memory, Death Troopers was definitely the sort of culmination. I think Red Harvest was a lot of setup. Yeah, it's very much a sort of a zombie horror type deal. And I think the final one I'm going to talk about, which I would be remiss to not add on to this list, given the fact that it is Halloween, and that is the Lego Star Wars Halloween special, where the sequel characters are sitting around a campfire telling horror stories. It's Lego, it's fun, it's not scary to an adult, but might make a child a little bit antsy. But no, it's all done in good fun, in the typical Lego fashion. What can I say? It's good. It is good. But that's going to do it for my sort of scary Star Wars chat for this month, this holiday period. Turning our attention to what I've been up to this month in Star Wars. We'll go through the regular list, and we'll start off, as we always do, with games. So Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I have been getting back into the game. It's been slow. It's been not my usual level of activity, but I am making sure certain things are done, and I am continuing my grinds for the new characters. I've managed to get 2 of the Gungans all the way up to 7 stars, and still got 2 more to work on, and they are slow going as they're only single drop instead of the double drops. They hit double drops after a year of being in game. And I've started working on what I'm kind of collectively calling the Peridia tunes. The 2 different types of Stormtroopers. You've got the Death Trooper Peridia and the Stormtrooper Peridia, who are both of the undead variety. And also working on Captain Enoch as well, who's in the game. We do have Balin Skull coming to the game soon, which I'm very much looking forward to, and hopefully he will be a good character. Really, really enjoyed him in Ahsoka. But outside of that, I've just kind of been ticking the boxes, really, doing what I need to do for the guild rather than anything for myself, but also sort of building up a few things here and there, building up resources as and when I see them in the stores and things like that. But that's about it for games, unfortunately. I don't have the time to really justify a £45 purchase of Jedi Survivor. So I'm going to wait for that to come down in price a little bit or be on sale or something like that before I pick that up, and then I'll start working through that. I did open up the Star Wars Topps game again recently, and if I'm perfectly honest, I tapped on it by accident. The icon changed, I didn't know what it was. So I tapped on it and I played around with it for an hour or so over the course of the last couple of weeks. Not huge amounts. It's good fun, but my time is in very short supply at the moment. And so having multiple games on the go at any one time is proving tricky. But looking at the collectibles side of things, I can confirm anyone who follows the YouTube channel, which is Star Wars Universe on YouTube, head over there, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon. You'll be notified when I upload. For anyone who's good at time differences, I upload at 10:30 a.m. British time. So we've just transitioned from BST to GMT. So, and that's every Monday is when those videos go live. So I've finished the Shadows of the Galaxy collection base set, and I've actually started a new Star Wars Unlimited collection, which I am looking forward to, but is going to be potentially quite expensive. So I'm starting a collection of any Star Wars Unlimited card that has Yoda or Grogu, and hopefully in the future Yaddle, on it in any form or fashion. So there is a card from Shadows of the Galaxy called Foundling, which is a Mandalorian warrior, but it has Grogu sitting on the Seeing Stone behind it. I am collecting that, and I'm going to get all 4 variants, or every variant of every card is, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to do, which depicts Yoda or Grogu. The new set is coming out in about a week or so. It's coming out on the 8th of November, which does have Yoda as a leader, which means there will be a Yoda showcase, which is expensive. They are the rarest set of cards in the game. Alternate special artwork for all of the leaders, and I've been very lucky. I pulled a Cassian Andor showcase from Spark of Rebellion, the first set, but I have not been able to pull another one since then. So I am hoping beyond hope that I pull it out of a pack, because they're not cheap. They're not cheap. I think the need list for that set is currently sitting around about the £80-85 mark. That's going to go up to close to £300 probably minimum with the showcase. I think there's only one other in the set that depicts Yoda, so thankfully not too expensive, but we'll see. Comics wise, as I've already mentioned, time has been in short supply recently, but I have managed to read the Kalnaka one shot, finish the Inquisitorius mini arc with reading issue 3 and 4. And I have started the Battle of Jakku, issue number 1. I do have issue number 2 ready to go as well. The Kalnaka one-shot, I was a little bit disappointed, I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit more information, but not huge amounts. It does depict why he has markings on his head, which, I'll be perfectly honest, during my watch of The Acolyte, didn't notice them at all. So it shows his master, it shows his apprentice, and it's just a little bit more background on the character, which is cool, which is good. I did enjoy it. It's not needed. I'll be perfectly honest. It's not essential reading, but it was all right. The Inquisitorius issues number 3 and 4, really, really good end to the story. It adds a bit more to what we already know about the Inquisitorius, their inner workings. The Grand Inquisitor plays a heavy role in that, as you'd expect, given he runs the team. Really, really good mini arc. Vader's in it. It's just a really good one. If you like the Inquisitors, go read it. Absolutely. If you don't like them, you're not going to like it. Kind of clues in the name there a little bit, really. But it's a lot of Fifth Brother. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like the Inquisitorius. as I've said many times before. So I do generally tend to like the Darksiders more than the Jedi. Don't know what that says about me, but there you go. Battle of Jakku, I am literally a couple of pages into it, so I don't have an opinion on it at the moment, but I will hopefully bring that opinion to you next month when I've read at least issue 1 and hopefully issue 2 and 3 if it's out or exists. But that's all of the comics I've managed to get through in the last month. Books-wise, I've done a bit better. I can officially say I have finished Aftermath Book 1. It does pick up in the second half of the book, and I ended up probably enjoying it overall. The first part, for me, was just very slow and not really my favourite thing. But I also listened to Beware the Nameless, the middle grade novel from the High Republic Phase 3. Really, really enjoyed it. The huts are a key part of this book and really, really enjoyed it. And I also listened to Padawan's Pride, which is an Audible exclusive. It's about 5 hours, and it's a Obi-Wan Kenobi and Padawan Anakin story. It's exactly what I've been crying out for, is more stories of Anakin and Obi-Wan whilst Anakin is still Jake Lloyd era Anakin. So he's 9 when they save him from Tatooine and he starts his journey to becoming a Jedi. I think in Padawan's Pride, I think he's 13. I think it's set 4 years later. And he's still Anakin. He's always Anakin. But they need his special set of skills in pod racing. And so the entire story is centered around the pod racing and the pod racing events and things like that. We meet a couple of familiar faces from the pod race on Tatooine, the Boonta Eve Classic. But overall, there's huts in it as well. It's a really, really good story. Really, really good, and definitely worth a listen if you've got Audible. Probably not worth getting a subscription to Audible, but there are a number of promo codes out there and things like that. I know Now This Is Lit podcast have a promo code with Audible that you can utilize, so maybe worth checking it out that way. So I managed to get through 3 books, or 2.5. We'll call it 2.5 because I've finished Aftermath. And I am about to start Tears of the Nameless as well, which is the young adult novel from the High Republic. And I've also picked up the Mace Windu novel, Glass Abyss, and also recently Deceived, the Legends Old Republic novel about Darth Malgus, as that is going to be the next book we review on the Sacred Jedi texts over at Source Pages. If you haven't listened to any of the stuff over there, we basically are going through a number of dark side centric books. Go and give it a listen. We've just recorded and released the Darth Plagueis review, or the Plagueis novel. It's always a good time. The other Jedi Council members over there are really, really good fun to podcast with, and are thankfully very regular contributors to the show as well. TV-wise, I finished watching the Lego Rebuild the Galaxy series, and stupidly good fun. Ridiculously good fun. It's just bonkers. There's no other way to describe it, really. It's just bonkers. Absolutely loved it. The first episode, which is all I'd watched at the point of the last episode on here, was slow and taking its time and setting everything up. But once it gets going, it's just bonkers, as I say. You get Darth Jar Jar, you get a good guy Vader and Palpatine, you get all these different people in a completely reversed role, and it's just really, really good fun. And a little extra one I'm adding in this month is events. I think at the point of the last episode, I was gearing up to go to a card show in Wembley Box Park. I went to that event. It was their first event, And I'll be perfectly honest with you, it really showed. Having been to a number of card shows, even ones where the first one I'd gone to had been like their third event, I really hope they learn a lot. That event, they massively oversold the VIP tickets. Basically, everyone got in on a VIP ticket. You could barely move in there. I don't think it was a good setup in terms of layout. You couldn't get anywhere near tables. You couldn't get to spend any time looking through cards, folders, or anything like that. I did pick up some Star Wars Unlimited packs, but overall, it was a long day for not much reward. I would go again, but they would only have one more chance with me personally. I met a lot of great people as well. I mainly ended up picking up some Pokemon cards for my son alongside the Star Wars Unlimited packs, which I then opened for the YouTube channel. But yeah, it wasn't a great show. As I say, there was a lot of things I think they needed to learn as in terms of hosting a card show or an event of that magnitude. But on the flip side of that, this coming weekend on the 2nd of November, so the day after this releases, I will be at the London Card Show in Esher. So if anyone wants to meet up, say hi, or anything like that, drop me a message on Twitter at StarWarsUpod, or drop me an email, starwarsupod@gmail.com, and happily meet up and chat Star Wars with you, by all means. That has been running for a number of years now, that show. They run 3 a year. They're expanding every year. I think this is the first time it's going to be over 2 levels. So I'm really looking forward to going to see what they've got going on. I will also be making a submission to PSA for some gradings of some of my Star Wars Unlimited cards. So I will keep you updated on the progress of those, probably via the YouTube channel, but I will also mention it here as it is Star Wars related. On the day of the release of this podcast, I will be going to a pre-release event for Twilight of the Republic, the 3rd set from Star Wars Unlimited. And I will be attending that at Spellbound Games in Elephant and Castle in London. I'm really looking forward to it. I think that it's going to be a good set. I think it's potentially got some problems, but in marrying up with the other sets, I think it's going to be some interesting developments in the game. I think some things are going to be changing in the meta of the game, and it's a new set to collect. So pre-release, always a good place to go. Keep an eye out for the video of that in the coming weeks. I don't know if I'm going to be able to edit it and do the voiceover and everything like that before Monday after this episode comes out, so it might be the following week. But we will see. I've got a busy weekend. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And we'll go from there. But that's everything that I've been up to this month in Star Wars. Turning our attention to what you guys have been up to this month, I put out a tweet earlier this month asking what people's favourite scary moment was in Star Wars and also what they've been up to. I have heard back from the wonderful Hayley Hobbs saying, scary for them, not necessarily us, but Vader's hallway scene in Rogue One. And unfortunately, all she can report is that she has started reading Tears of the Nameless. Brian Klein has sent in a voice note.
Hey James, Brian. I think my favorite horror moment in Star Wars is probably the Ewok hunt, which was a special game on Battlefront 2 where you play stormtroopers in the night at Endor and the Ewoks come and basically massacre everybody. As far as what I've been doing lately with Star Wars, my normal collecting, I rewatched Kenobi, I watched the new Rebuild the Universe, and started Glass Abyss. We just covered the Darth Plagueis novel, and that's pretty much about it. May the Force be with you.
Thank you very much, Brian. And Hayley, sorry you haven't been able to get to as much as I would imagine you probably want to. Todd's been busy this month, but I know he's been enjoying Darth Plagueis, and if you want to hear more of his thoughts on that, go and check out the source pages. A Reading Collective episode that just dropped, the Spark Jedi Council episode, Sacred Jedi Texts, where we cover that book. Our final bit of feedback this month is from Dan Griffin at DanGriffin21, who said, "The best jump scare is still the sucker creature and the Exegorth in Empire. Always funny." Can't disagree. It was on the list, and so, it was definitely up there for a lot of people as a scary moment in Star Wars, Dan. This month, I've gone back to Clone Wars again and getting on much better this time. Still only on Season 1 as taking a back seat for horror films. It is that time of year. And he's also found that he had a hard copy of the Darth Vader series, issues 1 to 6. And speaking of Dan Griffin, I can confirm he is going to be our guest next month. And so I'm really looking forward to having a chat with Dan and seeing how his love of Star Wars began, and have a chat about what I can recommend. If you've got any recommendations for Dan, let me know. Either send me a tweet at StarWarsUpod or an email, StarWarsUpod@gmail.com. And I did also put out a bit of a poll on Twitter recently, which initially ended in a draw, which was, what book should I read next? A little bit of a struggle to find my next read. I do now have 3 in the queue, but this one will make it 4, and I will bump it up the list and try and listen to it before the next episode. So the initial options were Ronin, Crimson Cline, Return of the Jedi, From a Certain Point of View, and Battle Scars. And I had to go to a second poll because there was a draw. That was between Crimson Cline and Battle Scars won. So I will add that to my list and let you know what I think. So if you want to keep an eye out on Twitter for what I'm doing, I don't tweet hugely often. I am trying to be a little bit more active on the platform. I keep saying Twitter, X, you know what I mean. But that's gonna do it for me this month. And thank you very much for listening. As I've scattered it throughout the show, drop me a line on Twitter, drop me an email, or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And until next month's episode, may the Force be with you, always.